Yeah, I'm Frank Cowell. I'm the founder of Revenue Ranch. And what Revenue Ranch is a business education and consulting firm. And what we aim to do is work with founders and their leadership teams to create businesses that can run without the superhero founder or any one superhero team member having to be at the helm, having to be involved. Because ultimately, businesses that are built around that kind of superhero mentality are businesses that don't scale very well. They're not as profitable and they're certainly not much fun to be involved in. And so my mission is to help free those leaders and founders from the chains of their business, really create a business that can run in spite of them so they can take time off anytime they want without having to check email, remain on Slack, or any of that other nonsense.
Virtual Latinos today is really a community that allows people to transform their lives. Uh, in terms of how we get there, it's through remote virtual relationships that connects South and North America in terms of how that process gets to be achieved. But really transforming lives is about the ability for both sides of the Americas to have the freedom that they were looking to have before they joined to work together, right? So people in the United States get that freedom to be able to hire professionals in Latin America that are capable of helping them run many of the processes or tasks in their business that they don't want to do or they don't have the time to do because they should focus on their own expertise. And so they get to build that freedom by outsourcing those tasks to other people, right? So while on the other side, the people living in Latin America are able to also create freedom by not having to, for example, commute, not having to physically show up to work. They create freedom because they're able to earn a lot more money than they would create otherwise by working locally in jobs that don't pay them as well and they don't value their work as well. So they're able to also control their own destiny and their own time. And that's another way to create freedom.
Creating a business structure that is not led by any one superhero, not led by any one founder, and that being the reason why the business is successful, but really a process where it's management team led, where everyone is aligned towards a true north and they have a planning and management process that is the same across the entire organization. Not again, not because the founder is just really great and inspiring and enthusiastic and charismatic, but because that management team is all really well aligned to their true north and their process of moving towards that true north on a very consistent basis. And when that gets in play, it becomes cultural. And so then we like to see that cascade down throughout the entire organization. So we're really talking about is cultural change within the company about how they execute, how they solve problems. And if we get everyone operating from the same playbook, then momentum starts to kick in. And when momentum starts to kick in, before you know it, people are attracted to the company that otherwise might not be. Clients are attracted to the company that otherwise might not be. And a lot of really good magical things happen. Again, not because of a magical founder, but because of this process that's unified throughout the company.
The original problem that I was trying to solve was really actually to be able to find talented professionals who could actually achieve and complete the high level and high quality task that I needed them to complete, but at a lower cost. I didn't want to hire outsourced workers just simply because the cost was lower, because although that's important, for me, the quality was really much more important.
Yeah.
So, uh, I would needed to find a good balance between high quality work at a very also attractive price to make sure that I could still get what I needed at the service quality that I was basically promising our clients and not letting that go, but also being able to have lower costs so that I can actually make more money as a company and continue to thrive and grow, right? And when you're giving these people opportunities to get a better standard of living, and then they're reinvesting that money in their local community, so then we say, okay, not only are we helping the people in Latin America improve their lives, as well as, of course, the people who are saving money and helping grow their businesses in the U.S., but then we're also affecting everybody around them, right? The communities that they're a part of, whether it's in the supermarket or the small businesses that they help or the schools that they support. So it just becomes a compounding effect of affecting a lot of people's lives, not only the ones hired or being hired. So, yeah, it's just the ability to transform the lives of a million people by creating so many connections between North and South America that spread around in in a way like wildfire, because those positive effects just continue to spread through the communities.
I mean, I don't know if you see this, but I see you know, a, the biggest trap founders fall into when they're trying to scale is they'll look in either one of two places, right? Something in sales or something or someone in the product, the service, the offering, right? Because they're usually the hero in both of those areas. The trap I see on the sales side is they go hire a salesperson and are frustrated when that person's not making it rain in 6 months. And the reality is they're not going to find someone who's going to make it rain in 6 months, because the reality is it takes a long time to build up a network, find people who happen to be in market to sign contracts for whatever it is that you're selling, and and then have the ability to speak on the level that the founder can speak on about the offering, about the problems, about the marketplace. So it's just a very unrealistic expectations, and it's a trap that many fall into. And they go through these cycles of hiring and firing salespeople and are frustrated. And then the next thing they do to try to solve that problem, because none of that is working, is they'll hire a marketing agency. And then they'll go through that same cycle of hiring a bunch of marketing agencies. And then they'll come to this conclusion that marketing agencies suck and that they're scamming them. And so they'll just go through this trap instead of understanding that, one, it's a compounding effect that needs to be put into place. So the jumping around is what's killing them. And number two, especially when it comes to a person who's going to do sales, I think where they're going to get a lot more traction is if they hire someone who's a lead generator, not a salesperson. And what do I mean by that? If they hire a salesperson, they're going to expect that person to go generate leads, shepherd the conversation through, and then eventually be putting together sales proposals and presenting proposals and eventually hopefully closing. I mean, that entire process is at least 2 jobs. Some might say 3 jobs, but I say at least 2 jobs. And I think where founders are best when they're trying to go beyond the founder, especially from a sales standpoint, is hire someone who's going to go knock on doors, make the calls, and connect with a targeted list, by the way, a very targeted list, and not just offer the services, but offer something of value that is free, or a way to engage in some sort of value-driven content or workshop or some sort of engagement so that person can be successful quickly. But if what you give that person as an objective is go get contracts,
Yeah, it doesn't work.
they're not going to be successful for a long time. That's very demoralizing. It's very frustrating. So why not give them easy things to sell, like free things to sell? And all they have to do is get people to a lunch and learn, get people to a workshop, get people to, some sort of thing. And before you know it, that person can start generating those kinds of conversions, if you will, in 30 days, 60 days. And so that to me is how they avoid the trap. But the trap is, trying to find someone to replace them from a superhero salesperson point of view, and that doesn't exist. And then the other trap I see on the other side with the product or the offering is that they hire someone in there to run the offering, but they don't hire high enough.
Okay.
They hire someone that ultimately they delegate to. They hire someone ultimately that still takes the lead from the founder. And they don't go hire the person that is absolutely truly seasoned at being a services or offering leader, who's got just as much experience as the founder, maybe more, who can truly be responsible for the things that the offering is supposed to deliver, which is gross profit and retention or repeat business, whatever your business model is. So they hire someone that they ultimately are still managing that area through proxy, and they're just delegating, and that doesn't work. And they hire someone who's not enough of an experienced leader. So I don't know what you experience and you see, but those are the two big ones for me.
And for me, especially when starting this business and the previous business, I think the biggest challenge I saw was managing people's expectations, which is very similar to what you just mentioned, right? Like for me, it was important that people saw that if we were gonna offer them anything, they understand truly what they were gonna get out in return, right? Because if I just try to sell them anything or any service without them understanding what will be the actual final effect of it, then I think that I would be starting a transaction that will ultimately potentially fail, right?
Right.
Because if they don't understand what is the actual output that they should be expecting, just paying me money for the sake of it without trying to understand what to expect on the other side wouldn't actually work. So I actually, in the marketing agency, I spent a lot of time explaining to people how the marketing, at least in some format, worked. Because I thought that if I just told them, yeah, this is what I can do and I can give you the results and you could just pay me a bunch of money, sure, I might get them for a couple of months or a period of time until eventually they're like, well, I don't understand what this guy is doing, but I'm just paying him money and he's not giving me results, right? So I really wanted to make sure that I invested the time to explain at some level what it actually took for the marketing to work.
Right.
In a way, like the challenge was for me to educate the client, like you just mentioned, right? Because if you don't actually understand how marketing works and you just think that by paying a marketing agency or someone to just do the work, magic is going to happen, it just doesn't work like that, right?
No, they often think that there's just some sort of campaign or trick or tactic that they're somehow missing out on, and somebody's got it. And the reality is that doesn't exist. The magic is relentless consistency on a few fundamentals. But at that point, they're just hoping somebody has the trick, the secret, and that doesn't exist. And so they are oftentimes disappointed when hiring marketing agencies, for example.
That happened to me, as I'm sure like you as well, right? That people would, already come to me like you coming for marketing help and already coming from working with somebody else that disappointed them. And then, you're trying to do a job of not only doing your job in terms of doing the marketing, but also convincing them that you're going to help them and you're not going to fail, right? So you're already working with somebody who's got a broken heart in terms of what didn't work out. And that was also already a challenge, right? So like, even though I wanted to make sure that the expectations were clear, I personally have also realized that not everybody wants to be educated because we're not in the job in this case as a marketing agency to educate them in how it all works. This is why they're paying, let's say, us to do the work, right? But when people weren't even interested in at least understanding a bit about how it works and they weren't willing to listen to the expectations of the outcomes, I usually tended to think that those clients were not going to last long, right? But those
Correct.
who listened and were willing to understand what it actually takes to actually be successful, then as we were working with them, on the monthly reports or as we were presenting the different deliverables, and I would say, hey, remember that I told you that this and this would happen? Well, this did happen or this didn't happen. So like in their minds, it would click, okay, I get it. He tried to explain to me that this was one possibility and this is the other possibility. But when the expectations were much clearer, they might think that people were less anxious and more understandable when things did work out or when things didn't work out, right?
Right, right.
And so that was for the marketing agency. For our clients right now in the marketing in the virtual Latinos recruitment agency, it was a very similar approach that I took. So in fact, from the very beginning, let's say when I started, I never have considered myself a salesperson because I personally hate selling. I don't like to make people think that I'm here to try to just get something out of them in terms of money, but instead I really am genuinely here to help them. And so when I started the business and up until very recently, we, had a policy in place internally that we actually didn't charge internally more money or more of a commission based on how expensive or less expensive the person that they were hiring would be. So I would always have conversations with them to convince them and to truly explain to them that no matter who they would hire from our company, whether it was the lowest level, most affordable assistant, let's say at $8 or $10 an hour versus somebody that's 20 or $25 an hour, regardless of who they chose, I wanted them to listen to me as a consultant and as an expert that I can tell them what's the type of level that they would be best to hire, knowing that I wouldn't be making actually more money from them, whether it was the most expensive person or the least expensive.
Right.
So when I built the, let's say, pricing structure and the profitability structure internally in the company, I chose to not incentivize our company and ourselves to make more money on purpose. And that was part of, when having the conversation with our clients, hey, listen, no matter who you choose, know that we are not incentivizing our team or ourselves to try to upsell you someone more expensive, which tends to be normal. And it's not that it's wrong, but I had that fear of making sure that people knew that I was here to help them and not to sell them anything,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But even that shift for many people sometimes it's hard to understand because everybody's, for good or bad, already very used to that when someone is trying to sell them something more expensive, usually when it's an industry that's commission based, they're probably doing it because they want to make more
They
money
make more money, right?
opposed to helping me, right? So that was something that for me was important about, again, managing the expectations. Hey, I'm here to truly help you. And up until today, for example, we don't actually have any sales team. We have a recruitment team that happens to do the functions of sales and recruitment. And the people who end up doing the type of conversations like you're talking about, where we're not trying to sell and that they're experts offering something of value to our clients, is the role that we call consultants. Because I very quickly, as I was starting to offer services in this space to our clients, I realized that the biggest value of feedback that came to me was the fact that I chose to spend a lot of time understanding what the clients were doing and what they thought they need versus what I thought they actually needed, and basically guided them into understanding what the real challenges were and what type of help they actually needed,
Right.
and gave them, pathways that will actually help them, and didn't actually just take their word for it for what they needed. They might say, hey, I think I need an admin assistant or a graphic designer, when really maybe they needed a social media or content editor, right? So when you had those conversations and you try to explain to them the reasoning behind it and why you're there to help them as a consultant, just trying to help, whether or not they end up hiring with us or not, now they have a better understanding of what they actually need. They could go buy it elsewhere,
Right.
right? But we've done a good job of, being valuable to them.
And so for you, what are you seeing as then the trap that if you didn't do that, that they typically fall into when trying to grow their business?
Correct. So the trap is like if they're just, not listening to our advice, which would be one thing, or they would just also be very, let's say, stubborn from saying, hey, I know what I need, and I need, for example, unicorns. Unicorns are always uh, things that people believe that somehow they exist, which, as you know, don't exist.
Looking for another hero.
Looking for another hero. Exactly. Because usually founders and entrepreneurs tend to be a mini unicorn that does a lot of things, and that's true. But
Right.
people aren't like that. So of course, small companies that are started by one or two people would come to us and like, well, I need an amazing digital marketer. Okay, well, you need a content writer, a social media specialist, an email marketing specialist, paying person. Like, you really need a team of like 7 people, or actually work with an agency, right? But you're not gonna find one person
Right.
that's gonna do all these things at the highest level, right? So if people were not willing to listen and they weren't willing to have their expectations managed correctly, they would definitely ultimately fail.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the way to answer that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm often a fan of saying, one level strategy is another level's tactics, meaning like, this particular level strategy are really the tactics of the level above, right? And so it cascades through the organization like that. And I think every level needs strategic clarity, but at the very top level, to me, I think of strategic clarity about ultimately where the company wants to go and how it's going to be different in the marketplace and how it's going to drive impact and what kind of transformation it's going to bring to its marketplace.
Yeah.
And I think in today's world, that has to be razor sharp. We just live in a world today where I've been saying this for many years, there's just so much commoditization. And it's really interesting to say, oh no, when I said it 10 years ago, it's nothing compared to what I mean today when I say commoditization.
Oh, yeah.
And in today's environment, the big X factor has been AI and tech and automation. And so now it's even more commoditized, even more crowded. So I think strategic clarity is about hyper focusing in on who you're going to serve, what they're trying to achieve, what's standing in their way, how you articulate the transformation around that, and what it means to make that impact and why everyone should care about that impact. And I think if you can articulate that to your team, they can get behind that, they can get excited about that, and then they know where the company is going. And then we can cascade that down a bit and then talk about some of the high level how. Okay, so now we have a clarity in destination. We probably should have a little bit of clarity in the strategic how. It's like, oh, we're going to play in this space and we're going to deliver these kinds of solutions to bring about that transformation.
Even for us, when we started the company, we had a very specific niche and we were offering something very unique. But, time has passed and it's been a while, and now we got lots of competitors. Things are a lot more commoditized. So things have changed very, very fast in the last even couple of years. So we're constantly trying to make sure that we can reinvent ourselves, or we can make it even more clear how our company wants to be and continue to be different from the rest, right? Because if you don't, then you're competing in a space where we don't really want to compete. We want to be in a space that we are already unique enough that we don't see the rest of the people as competitors.
Yeah, I think what needs to drive every company at the heart is that transformation, that audience, that problem you're going to solve. I think if you just obsess about that, your how can wrap around that, and you can add on offerings, you can change offerings. But if you stay obsessed with the transformation about that audience and hug on that audience and love on that audience more than anyone else, and not be married to your current core offering. And I don't mean to chase a bunch of shiny objects, but I've been telling people you need to think of a different mental model in how you view your business. You need to view your business as an enablement platform, not a services or products platform. You're an enablement platform because if you think about that core transformation, you might do that through services. You also might do that through community.
Yeah.
You could do that through training, right? You could do that through software. You could do that through events. You could do that through peer groups. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can provide and help enable the transformation. That's what sits at the middle that doesn't change. And if you become obsessed about that and understand that as an enablement partner, that's the mental shift that needs to be made, especially in today's world. Because if you're just a services firm about that transformation, there are a lot of people copying your services. If you're just a software company, there are a lot of people copying your software. And again, that's not to say you have to be in a bunch of different businesses, but you do have to be in one solid audience problem transformation space, I believe.
For sure. For example, one of the things that in our business, the question continues to come, like, what are we specializing in, or what is the true value that we bring as an organization? Like, sure, we're doing, for example, in this case, recruitment, but like one of the, for example, things that ends up popping out in one conversation or another is like, hey, like there's plenty of companies where people can just hire on their own. Maybe we should go back to offering a platform where people can hire on their own, which we did actually at the beginning. This is how the company got started. But the reason that I changed the business model and focused on the agency where we do it for them is exactly for that reason, because there's plenty of places before our company started where you can go and hire on your own.
Right.
That part was new. I didn't build that completely from scratch. Like before Virtual Latinos had its directory where you could hire on your own through our vetted platform, you could have gone to LinkedIn, you could have gone to some of the other sites where you can hire, let's say, freelancers, even though it's, different. But I still see, for example, in our case, that this transformation in terms of the value that we provide to our customers is in that hand holding of helping people through the journey of understanding, how to hire, efficiently, and how to be successful with that relationship, and doing it all kind of for them, right? Because if people wanted to do it on their own, they can. Then maybe they don't need us. Their whole value is because we're there to consult with them, to help them figure it out,
Right.
and to support them through that, journey. Now the challenge becomes, okay, at what point do they still need us, or how can we continue to provide value so that they still stick around?
Do you have a true north for your business that is this obsession around this transformation and the kind of people you need to bring on the team to make it happen? And you articulate that brand value proposition in a way to where when your audience hears it, there's nobody else for them but you. Well, when you have that true north defined, that actually sits at the center. And then what revolves around it is a repeating cycle of planning and management, planning and management. And so the idea is that if we can consistently through the planning process figure out how to line things up in what I call momentum order. And so momentum order is about understanding that when you look at the different functions in a business, there's a particular order of optimization that really matters. I call it the 7 mechanisms of momentum. And if you start working on things out of order, the business will not experience the momentum you hope for. And so working in momentum order is really critical. So that's one of the big differentiators in the growth momentum method is we focus on this idea of momentum across the 7 mechanisms. And then when we actually go to implement projects that improve the business, there's a process to also break that down to ensure you're going to work on the right aspects of the project. In other words, what's the real problem? Because if you're not working on the real problem, again, you're not going to get the momentum. I'll give you an example. I was working with a client. We were doing this thing in front of a bunch of other entrepreneurs, and this gentleman was convinced that the mechanism that I call active lead generation, that was his focus, that was his thing. And I said, okay, let's prove that out. So we went through this exercise that I teach all my clients, and I teach in the growth momentum method. Went through this exercise to peel it back to find out, well, what's the real problem? And lo and behold, and he was shocked. He sat there, kind of his eyes real big. The problem existed in his service offering area, which, if you look at, again, what I call the 7 mechanisms of momentum, that actually takes place before your lead gen optimization. That's not to say you shouldn't optimize lead gen, but strategically, the lead gen wasn't the problem. Strategically, the problem lived in his service offering area. And lo and
Match what he was promising.
what's that?
It didn't match what he was promising.
No, there was another root cause that had to do with, I think it had to do with something about replication of, what his influence was in the business, and creating proof and, consistency that would then feed the impact lead gen. And so lo and behold, that was where the project needed to live. But if he didn't do that, he would have done what so many companies do, which is like, let's sit around a table and come up with ideas for lead generation. And they're going to try an idea, and the idea doesn't work because you're not going to make it rain the first idea you have. And so that's like a really important part of the process, is understanding what the real problem is and work on things in momentum order. And then once you have that plan, what do you do to keep your team accountable to the plan? What do you do to make sure that 3 weeks into the plan, you don't say, oh, you know what? This particular problem that's in front of us right now is more important. I can't tell you that. When we talk about traps, right? We talked about traps earlier. A big trap in the business world is when people develop their plan and they get excited about the plan for the quarter or for the year, whatever it is. Literally, like 3 weeks into the plan goes off the rails because whatever is in front of them that day seems like it's more important than the plan. That's a trap. There's a phrase that goes like this: what's salient is important, meaning what's in front of us here right now has an outsized perception of importance, meaning, okay, if it's in front of us now, it must be more important than the plan that we committed to, and it's not. It's almost never more important. So I teach protocols so you actually stick to your plan and make sure that you and your team are going to be accountable to the plan.
I virtual Latinos, even though I didn't initially, let's say, adopt any specific methodology, I was very much about, okay, this new company I'm going to try to build definitely is going to have systems that include operating procedures, that it's very clear what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, so that it can be repeatable, and at least the systems that will help us manage the company. Now, that still did not include vision or mission specifically, or data review or planning. So like, we still didn't really have a methodology. And it's actually you who taught me many years ago at this point to check out the book Traction,
Yeah.
right? And you said, Jaime, if you want to scale at the time your marketing agency, go read Traction, and then it will actually help you have some system to help you grow offers. And that system has been very, very much helpful compared to not having it.
Yeah.
Now, today it's been now a little bit over 3 years that we've been using it. And like every system, I think that every company works differently. And there's things that don't truly work for me personally, even though maybe they work for many businesses. So, I think that when you want to also make your business fit a single system and you're not customizing it to match your needs, then it's also a separate problem, right? Because every business has their unique needs, in my opinion. And after speaking to a lot of other entrepreneurs too, like everybody does actually EOS a little bit in a different method. Not everybody uses the clear, pure way of using EOS. But to answer the question, that system definitely has helped us manage how we view data, metrics, have cadence in terms of how often we meet, and create a lot of the structure that we use today that's been very helpful.
So one of the great things is when founders do get this clarity and they're implementing a proper planning and management process and they're behaving in that way. Um, a lot of amazing things happen in the team. The team starts to blossom. The team starts to flourish. The team starts to feel like they can have ownership over something in some aspect. They can have that autonomy and they can really start to take pride in how their skills grow. The founder themselves also starts to experience a lot more freedom. They don't have to be the one that's the superhero and has all the answers when you do it right. I like to say this: we're looking to fire the founder. And I don't mean remove them from the company.
No.
I'm talking about the founder as a job role.
Yeah.
The founder as a job role, really important to get the company off the ground and prove that, you can sell something and deliver something.
Yeah.
Really important. You got to have the founder as a job role. And when you do that, there's so much freedom that happens. So much freedom. You start to see a lot more predictability in the business. You start to see a lot more, to start to see profit. I see it all the time with my clients. We have an analytics tool in our product where when they put their data in, you look at the time we started working together and they started implementing these habits and these protocols, trend lines are moving in the right direction. That's not to say that I make claims like if you do this, you're going to double your business overnight, but you will absolutely start to see trend lines move in the right direction. And when you talk about moving trend lines related to gross profit and profit, that's huge. Yes, you can increase your revenue, but you could also do some things that impact gross profit and bottom line profit that become very huge. And when you do that, man, you could take a vacation and not check a single email the whole time.
And I'm happy to say that I feel that I'm very much already, in there. And I'm proud to say, that I have definitely felt that now I've been able to take time off and not worry about things and not have to check my email or my messages, and like things are working without me, right? Not to say that it is perfect in any way and there's a lot to still do, but definitely, for example, our CMO was a great person that I knew that I needed, but it was hard for me to, also make the move that I needed to make at the time to accept that the team that initially started with me had outgrown itself in terms of the needs for the company.
Right.
And even though I had a great director of marketing at the time, as the company kept growing, I realized that I still played that CMO or high level marketing strategist role that I still wanted to be involved in, but not lead because I needed or wanted to spend my time in other things. And so I wanted to find someone that was
Yeah, at that time,
better than me.
you were just the marketing director by proxy.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of traps, I know we talked about this, but another trap that I see often, when it's time to hire the head of lead generation, the head of sales, or head of your offering, the big trap I find is they don't go get someone who's truly better than them, is because they say, "Oh, I can't afford it." I've got X amount per year, and the reality is that next level they want to hire is maybe, let's call it 30,000 per year more, maybe 40,000 per year more, which sounds like a lot of money. The reality is that difference is a drop in the bucket compared to what's going to happen in the company. And I like to tell people you can't afford not to do that, because if you don't hire that level, what's going to happen is you're still the leader by proxy. And so you truly don't get the freedom, and then they don't have the autonomy, they don't have the authority, and they're not going to excel the way you hope.
And I still struggle with that. I'm not gonna lie. There's still things that I want to manage because I feel like there's gonna be somebody in charge that has either my vision or my execution style, and that's why there's still areas in the business that I've still struggled to figure out who's the right person to lead certain things so that I don't have to make certain
Right.
decisions, right? But yeah, that's part of the challenge of growing a business.
But it's a journey. And, we can talk about all these things idealistically and know I think it's a good reminder to say, hey, here's what ideal looks like. And we're going to keep moving in that direction. So as long as we keep moving, that's why, again, I call it their true north, because you got to have something that kind of keeps pulling you back towards, nope, this is it. We got to keep going that way. And it's a long journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I was 15, I was the leader of a youth movement, and I was given a huge responsibility other people's kids to manage for a few hours every Saturday at a youth movement. And so that to me became a huge responsibility that I wanted to make sure that I took very seriously, because it's people's kids that I had the ability to make a huge impact on. And now today, that I'm a founder and entrepreneur leading a lot of people in lots of different roles and in lots of different levels, I think that leadership has evolved in a completely different way, because now I've also lost that, in a way, personal one-to-one connection in terms of like people looking up to me. Like there is people that I just genuinely don't know on a one-to-one basis today, because there's either people that have been hired very recently in the company for the internal team, or people that work with our clients, or our clients ourselves. There's now a much bigger network of people that my leadership has helped and that makes an impact on. So at the same time, that personal part that I've lost is sad to me, because I love that personal connection with people. But at the same time, it's also a huge gift that I'm now able to make an impact to a lot of people, whether or not I'm physically or digitally, let's say, close. Right. Because now I feel like my leadership now makes a much bigger impact. And so the way that I choose to lead is even now, I guess, more important, because it affects more people, right? Not that it wasn't important before, but now I need to, let's say, be more careful and be much more strategic about what I do or what I say, because now every step I take might make a much bigger ripple effect across. So that for me has been challenging in terms of accepting that reality, because I still see myself as the same me, whether it was at 15 or at 41 now, in terms of like I'm being me and the best version of me I can. But now I really need to, for the good and for the bad, be very careful with how I communicate, to make sure that I'm not misunderstood, or people basically feel potentially wrong and based on how I approached a communication or a problem. And so, yeah, it's a bigger responsibility.
My definition of that really changed, and I really drew a distinction between leadership and management. And, a lot is said in the business world about leadership and its importance, and it's true. I think the business world doesn't often talk enough about, though, the counter to that, the other side of that, which is management. And the reality is management is probably 90% of the job. And so, we say we need good leaders. Yes, we need good managers.
Even better, man.
We need even better managers. And so what's interesting is if you have someone who has good leadership skills, they can get a team to stay loyal to them, but maybe their area of the business doesn't move forward all that much because there's not good management. You can take someone with great management skills and no leadership, and you'll hit targets, but the people won't be maybe passionate or loyal. Now, if you combine both, now you get people who are passionate, loyal, and they're driving outcomes. And so it's interesting that that leadership is such a small portion of the time, but it's an X factor to your management skills. And so I think it's really important, as long as there's a desire to grow actual management skills. And I think if one is questioning how they grow in their leadership, to me, the easiest way to think of it is come from a place of service. Like Ralph Waldo Emerson's quote of "serve and thou shalt be served" is one of my favorite quotes ever, and I try to live my life that way. And I think if you bring that to your work where you're managing other people, that's going to serve you really well from a leadership standpoint. Because what leadership is how you respond when things don't meet the black and white rules, when scenarios aren't easy, when situations are tough, when there's tension. That's leadership. It's how you respond in the face of those things. But the bulk of the time, you need to be excellent at management. So that's kind of how it's evolved for me over time. And when I think if people just bring that, and I try to teach that to other people, come from a place of service. Don't worry about yourself. You will gain so many rewards by being a good servant to people. That's leadership. They call it servant leadership, right? And so I think if you come from a place of being a servant on that side, you could pretty much check the box on leadership, because it's going to really drive how you behave in the face of, again, those things we talked about, tension and problems and challenges. But but get really good at management. Because when you pair those together, as an individual, you're unstoppable, whether you're the founder or you're leading a department of just a few people. The shift is in letting a fire burn. That is usually shocking to hear. Most founders aren't used to that. Oh, you mean I'm going to ignore a problem? Yes. Why? Because it's not the problem you've decided to focus on for this particular period, whether it's a quarter or whatever. If it's not part of that current plan set and it's not derailing the current plan, or what I say, not blocking the current plan, it goes on the backlog. And so teams, founders and their executive teams absolutely need a backlog, and they need to hold each other accountable to putting things on the backlog that aren't blocking the current plan. And so many teams and the leaders the founder leader is usually guilty of making this a cultural thing. They're just tackling any and every problem that comes up and chasing any and every idea. And then they wonder why the plan that they got excited about didn't complete. Like, oh, we didn't complete our projects, or we tried to rush the project that we committed to out in the last 2 weeks of the planning cycle. Well, when you do that, it never gets done in a way that's high quality. So that's really the difference between a busy founder versus a strategic, scalable leader. And you just have to be smart about what's occupying your calendar.
And I can tell you that definitely this is something we struggle in, I think, probably almost every quarter, right? We have the yearly goal, and no matter what quarter we're on, suddenly things come up because things always come up and there are always distractions. And sometimes we do get distracted, whether it's for a day or two or potentially a few weeks. And then, the question is then, do we keep getting distracted for the next quarter? Or do we really say, hey guys, do we need to keep doing this or maybe not, right? And like recently that, we did our quarterly meeting, we were distracted right before it for a few weeks, but we sat down again. And then I think that's the part of the beauty of following a system. Okay, it's a quarterly review. How are we doing? How are we getting closer to our yearly goal? Let's look at the yearly goal literally together. And do we continue focusing on the things we said we were going to focus, which are not these distractions, or should we take care of the distractions right now, right? And so, yeah, like part of me sometimes is like, well, I really do want to take care of the distraction, but if we do that, we're definitely not going to achieve our yearly goal because we're clearly going to be busy and not prioritizing what we said we wanted to prioritize at the beginning of the year, right? So at least I'm happy to say that, in this last quarterly meeting, we did realize there's a lot of things that we need to do. We put them in a list. We did not prioritize most of them. And we said, well, we still got to prioritize things that will actually drive us to getting closer to our goal. But that's hard to do because distractions come all the time.
Yeah, you have to really give yourselves permission to say no to a problem and let it just remain a problem. That's a huge shock to a founder, to a company culture, is to let a problem remain a problem. And again, unless that problem's blocking the current plan, or it's going to result in some true disaster, you have to ignore it. You have to put it on the back, what I call the backlog.
That's right. And we have lots of problems that have been in the backlog for a long time, but unless they...
But guess what? They've been there a long time and nothing happened.
Exactly.
Right? Nothing major happened. So just validation that it wasn't truly
that's right.
a hair on fire, someone's bleeding our bank account dry kind of emergency.
Right.
Yeah. The protocols that create that kind of discipline and getting everyone roped in that process. I'm huge on self-accountability. And part of, there's some other ways you can do that, which is, when problems arise, asking that person, why did that happen? What could have been done differently? What will you do differently next time? What are ideas you have for preventing it? What are systems you could put in place? Asking the questions. Do not solve for your people. Do not solve. Provide them the what, meaning the result. Ask them to come up with ideas for the how. And so between, like the cadence that I talked about, the accountability cadence, and then this kind of question-based leadership, letting them come up with the solutions, right there you start to create a lot of self-accountability and not this manager to subordinate kind of.
Do this or do that.
Yeah.
I agree. Definitely makes a big difference. Especially lately, I've had some meetings with different team members where, I did specifically ask them, tell me about these challenges, the challenges that we were having in this department or that department. And that's an easy to do thing. Everybody can come up and make a list of all the problems and challenges that were.
Yeah.
And then I said to them, I guess something they were not expecting. I'm like, okay, great. So do you have a plan? And they're like, no. So how are we going to solve it? Well, I don't know. You just asked us for the challenge. Okay, great. But like, are you expecting me to solve the challenge?
Right.
C-level person to solve the challenge? I mean, not necessarily, right? But I'm like, well, from now on in general, I want you guys to know that, anytime that you're going to bring in challenges, think about how you need to also step in with going to the next step about coming up with solutions, because you shouldn't just bring challenges and then think that the leadership is always in charge of fixing those challenges.
Right. Right.
So now I'm trying to make sure that everybody knows that, yeah, challenges are good to be written down and we need to know what they are, but it's just as important to proactively think about several solutions for how to attack them before your manager or your leader asks you for what the solution will be, right? So that people are constantly thinking, okay, we have a problem, let's start thinking about solutions even before anybody asks us for a solution, right? Because anybody that you want in your team, in my personal opinion, should constantly try to be proactive in terms of how to solve problems instead of being told all the time what to do. So now that we've lived and the world has become a global connected world where you can connect with and work with anyone anywhere, it's a beautiful period in our lifetimes to be able to actually know that you can actually hire talented individuals no matter where they live, right? And for those talented individuals, it's also an amazing opportunity to know that they don't actually need to leave their homeland and their neighborhoods and the cities and their families that they like to be around for the need for a better life or a better job, right? I mean, obviously, immigration has been going around the world for generations. And as an immigrant to the US, and coming from immigrants from the Middle East and Turkey to Mexico, like, people are always chasing what's better. And that's always been for hundreds of years what humans have had to do in order to get to a better stage in their lives and get to a better standard of living, right? So when we can now offer both sides of the table the ability for people to connect and earn or be, job that they're going to be happy with and be able to feel like they're fulfilling their life mission, whether it's economically or professionally speaking, in terms of what you're able to achieve as a professional and grow without having to give something else in exchange is, I think, a huge, huge blessing to the world, right?
So some of my perceptions about the benefits, being half Latino myself, like I'm biased towards, Latin folks from Latin America. And I think that knowing how much passion there is in the work that is brought to the table. And then there's just simply the understanding of English as the primary language in the US, and all of your folks being extremely fluent in English. I think one of the things I found by working with different assistants from different areas of the world, I think the Latin American benefit is there's a massive comprehension level. There's a difference between understanding and comprehending.
Definitely, especially
And
culturally wise.
And culturally. So, I often say, that, when you hire out in Latin America, like they understand the English and they will comprehend it. And that is huge. So I think that's a huge benefit. And I think the understanding of, the US culture is a huge benefit. So I would identify where in the company people could use a better tool and get practice with working with now the new and improved tool. The next layer up is where you're building gears, gears that build towards bigger machines. So again, I'll go back to my 7 mechanisms, right? Like each mechanism is its own major machine in the business. So for example, active lead generation is one of my major mechanisms. Well, to make that whole mechanism, which is a big machine, work, it's built up of a lot of gears and then tools and people, right? So those gears are all the dependent little machines, right? So then think about, okay, in our process of getting a particular thing done, where could we from from one start point to an end point, where could we apply automation and AI in there? And maybe there's humans involved at that point, but where can we turn that into an operationalized process?
Yeah.
So the key thing that I'm big on is this word operationalize. So a lot of times when people deploy a project to improve something in the business, they don't operationalize it, which means they kind of solve it for the moment, but in 6 months, it's going to be a problem again. And so what I tell people is operationalize it, which is, document it, train it, make sure it's accessible. But the last piece is employ the tech to make sure that what you've developed always runs and it's never going to stop. And so that's a gear. I would call that like building gears in your business. So if you think about like the lead generation area, it's like, yeah, you got to do writing, you got to do these things, and those are tools that can help people do it. But one of the gears might be um, consistently building a targeted list. Okay, you might have humans doing that with tools right now. How can we turn that into a gear to where once you build it and put it in play, it's always going to happen? And I don't, yeah, that's going to look different for every business, but you could have a workflow that's just on a schedule where every day it's going to go out and look at these certain pages and look at these certain directories and look at these certain social media, and it's going to gather the list. And then the next step is going to do this. And then maybe the final step is now the human gets a task and says, oh, you've got 100 people to review. And then at the end, when they check and say approved, that goes into another section of your CRM, and now that gear is done. So think it, if you get overwhelmed and say, how do I build the entire lead generation process and automate that? It's just big and it's made up of a lot of gears. So just break it down into these kind of like sub workflows and just one gear at a time. You can you can build one. It's like, oh, now we've got a list consistently being built.
Yeah, today we have over 400 flows internally. So we already been definitely making sure that automations are very much a part of our processes, right? And now the challenge is okay, we know how to automate stuff, which is triggering and actions, right? The next step is okay, how do we not just do more automations, but how do we make things more efficient through other methodologies, right? But yes.
Like if I can condense it down into that concept, right? It's like two sides of a coin. There's the focus, which is the business strategy, and then getting everyone to a high level of exceptional execution. And that doesn't mean just with whatever your service offering is. That's in your finance team, that's in your admin team, that's in your marketing and sales team, like a culture of exceptional execution. And so if you can just think about that as a founder, your job is to make sure those two things happen. Your job isn't to be, and so elevating up and understanding how do I get this entire company to have focus, which is the strategy, and exceptional execution. That's the job. And that's the elevation that founders need to make is that's not a founder job anymore. That's this leadership role. That's this management role. And if you can make that shift, then as a founder, you stand a chance to build something that can run without you.
So I'd say that is to think beyond what's possible and beyond the limits of really your imagination. Um, Even before I started this business, uh, and I was trying to build my brand as a person, I wanted to focus at least on myself, the ability to grow things bigger than you can think of by leveraging, in this case, outsourcing and automations and AI, right? And this is before AI actually came out. So it was really just automation. So I think that as a founder today, uh, not being limited by the things that you see as your current potential to where you can get to as a business by looking at what other businesses are doing is really the key to build something that doesn't exist and that will actually be much more powerful than just trying to copy anybody, right? And I just, built something completely different. Yeah, in that case, it was right positive. So, like, talking about whether it's outsourcing work or working with technology and AI, I think that today we live in an era that many things that we can't even potentially even imagine today can potentially be achieved beyond anything that you currently know as a limit. So that's it. All right, cool. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Now we can go eat if you like.
Yeah. I'm starving.